With this video, we're going to talk about valve timing, and we're also going to remove the pistons and the cylinder head off from this vehicle. So the first thing I did is I looked up the specifications. For valve timing, you have to time the camshaft and the crankshaft, and there are marks on the camshaft and crankshaft that need to be lined up. So here's the specs on where we're supposed to line them up. There's a mark here, and there's a mark down here on the crankshaft. And so we'll go find those on the engine, line them up, and then we'll remove the cylinder head. The timing marks that I was going to show you are right here on the crankshaft, and they're right up here on the camshaft. If you look right up in here, there's a little timing mark there, there's a timing mark there, and those have to be lined up. But I was going to show you that, but here's the problem with this engine. Now this engine's been apart before, and so somebody has, when they reassembled it, it wasn't reassembled correctly. And if you look, I'm putting quite a bit of pressure on that, and the engine's not rotating at all. And so we've got to figure out why this engine isn't rotating. So we're going to do that now. To remove this cylinder head, what we need to do is we need to take the timing chain off, and we need to take the camshafts out. So to take the timing chain off, you're going to remove these two bolts here that hold the tensioner, and you're going to remove the guides. So these bolts here that hold the guides in place. Take the guides off, the tensioner off, then we can remove the timing chain. And then when we get up on top, we're going to remove each one of the caps on the camshaft, and then these main caps up here. And so once we get all those off and we can lift the camshafts out, you need to make sure that you keep the camshafts in the correct position. There's going to be an exhaust cam and an intake cam, and they need to go back in the same place. So we'll go to that point. I've pulled the chain off, so the chain is off, the tensioners are off. So now we're going to take the cams out. And when you take the cams off, it's always a good idea. It's not necessarily, it won't tell you this in a lot of service informations, but it's always a good idea that whenever you're loosening up the bolts for either a camshaft, cylinder head, whatever, start in the middle and work your way out towards the ends. So I'm going to start here in the middle, and I'm going to loosen these caps, and then I'll loosen these caps and those, and then we'll lift the camshafts out. Just wanted to show you a picture here. I've got all the caps off, and I did keep the caps oriented in the correct order when they came off. And I've already pulled the one camshaft out, and then the other camshaft just lifts out just like so. When you pull a camshaft out, you really need to be careful not to damage the lobes, which my thumb is tapping on right here, or the journal, which would be these right up here. So the smooth areas where the journals are, or the lobes, either one, you want to make sure that you don't damage those, because that can destroy the camshaft. Now to take the lifters out, I'll show you a quick little trick. If you have a small magnet, like this one on the end of this screwdriver, you can just pop the lifters out just like so. Now the lifters do need to stay in the same place that they came out of, so make sure you don't mix them up as you pull them out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift them all out like this, and then I can set them over here on the bench in an order where when I go back together I can get them back in the same place that they came out of. So this works out really well. A small magnet when you're disassembling an engine is really invaluable. And so now that I've got all the lifters out, once I get these lifted out, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to take all the cylinder head bolts off, and then we'll lift the cylinder head off. I've got all the bolts out. I just wanted to show you a little trick on pulling the bolts out. Here again, we're using that small magnet, and we can lift those bolts right out of the cylinder head with a small magnet. And so that really does help when you're trying to get these things out, because the bolts are recessed way down in there. The other thing I wanted to show you is these bolts do take a special tool, and it's kind of a splined wrench that goes on there. So you put this on the bolt, and then you have to use an actual socket to turn it, or a wrench to turn them loose. And when I cracked these cylinder head bolts loose, I started in the middle and I loosened that one, then I went here and here, just kind of in an X pattern. and then I'll come over here, and then over here, and then once I got them all loose, then I took them all out, and now we're ready to lift the cylinder head off. Okay, we're going to lift off the cylinder head. Sometimes you can get a little pry bar in here and kind of help it, because if the cylinder head has not been off the engine, the gasket tends to glue it to the engine really well. But we're just going to kind of lift this one, rock it back and forth, and it comes off just like so. Got it. And that's what the bottom side of the cylinder head looks like right there. And let me show you the gasket. The gasket is a metal gasket. And this one actually is in just one piece. But some of these gaskets, they actually have multiple layers, and they're not reusable. And usually there's a top side to the gasket and a bottom side to the gasket. So when you're looking at the head gasket, when you're putting it on, make sure that if it does say top or bottom, that you orient it correctly so that you're putting it on the top or the bottom. We're going to check cylinder warpage on the cylinder head. And so what we've done is we've got our straight edge again. And we're basically going to measure it in several different ways. Right now we're kind of at an angle across the cylinder head like this. So you have the cylinder, the feeler gauge, and right now I've got the smallest feeler gauge in this set, which is 15 thousandths of an inch. And you try and slide it underneath. And try to slide it underneath the entire length of the straight edge, and it's not going underneath it at all. So that's good. That means we have less than 15 thousandths if we have any warpage at all. And so we're going to measure it on this side as well, do the same thing. And if you look at this 15 thousandths, it's almost like tin foil. So I'm going to go in across there. I'm not seeing anything there. We'll go straight across this way to make sure that there's nothing there. And it looks like we're good as far as the cylinder warpage goes on this one. Now this cylinder head, as well as like the Volkswagen engine that we were looking at earlier, if you look at this one here, you also want to look and make sure there's no cracks. Now it looks like there's cracks there, but those aren't really cracks. And the only way to really tell accurately is with a Magnaflux machine. So this is something you would send to the machine shop and have them check to make sure that there's no microscopic cracks in between these valves. If you notice, you got like 4 different places where they can occur. And the other thing you want to look at is you want to make sure that this surface is machined and it's nice and smooth, and that there's no nicks and gouges in it anywhere. And the gasket needs to be 100% cleaned off of this. When you're cleaning gaskets on these engines, this is an aluminum block engine, so you need to be careful of what you use to get the gasket off. Don't use razor blades, use non-marring tools, and that way so you don't gouge and make a place in the cylinder head where it won't seal anymore. And just for informational, these little holes here, these are coolant jackets. Last week we talked about coolant and how coolant flows through the cylinder head. This is where it flows through, is these holes here. And so that's what all these little holes are. And on some head gaskets, there may be some of these that are plugged up to maintain temperature on different cylinder heads. So anyway, that's how this one works. Now if you notice this one here, that's got a broken valve, so that would be a problem. That cylinder would have no compression. So I'm not sure exactly how that valve got broken, but it is broken there.